Hello everyone and welcome to this CSS Selector series for the testers. In this particular tutorial, we will start with the very basic and we will learn about the ID and class. So let's begin. As an automation tester, the first thing we need to do is that we need to locate the element uniquely. We have already learned about the export concepts. Now let's see how we can utilize the CSS Selector to identify the element uniquely. Now we have this form. I will right click on this one. So what you can do is that you can write a CSS selector to locate this particular field uniquely. Now, there are very basic concepts. So first thing is about the ID and the second is about the class. So these are the two attributes. If you go here and we inspect any element, so you see that we have ID and in some cases we have class here as well, right? Now, again, the purpose here is that we need to identify or locate the element uniquely. If nothing is working, so you can write your CSS selector as well. So when ID is available, what you can do is that you can uniquely identify that element with the hash. So for example, the ID here is first name. So I copy this one. So in case of ID, what you can do is that you can use the ID and at the start you will be using a hash. So mainly the ID is unique in nature, so it will uniquely identify that particular element. So let's copy this one from here, go back here and control F here and paste this one. So you see that it's one of one, right? Because this ID is unique in nature. Sometimes it can be dynamic, but the thought is that if unique ID is available, then you can write a CSS selector using the hash. Now let's go with the this last name field, and again we have this last name unique. So let me copy this one and paste it over here. Copy this one and go back here and paste this one here, and you see that we have uniquely identified this one. Now, people think that it might work with the name and other attributes, but this is not the case. The hash will always work with the ID. So let me show you an example over here. So let me take example here where we have a different name. So let's go down and here ID and name is same. Let's scroll down and here we have ID and again name same. I need to find something which has a different name. So here again this is the same. Let's scroll down more and try to find some field where we have a different name or any other attribute. So for example, let's go with the placeholder, right? So placeholder is basically another attribute, right? So we can copy this one and just go back here and press this one and press hash. So as I said that this hash only works with the ID. So when ID is available, then you can write the CSS selector with the hash. So copy this one and go back, and if you paste this one, you see that it didn't identify any or located any element over here, right? So always remember that this hash works when you have an ID. Okay. Now the second thing is that is about the class. So when you have a class, so what you can do is that you can use dot with the class name, dot and followed by a class name. Okay. And so let's go here and let's try to identify based on this one. And again, here we don't have any class over here, right? And let's scroll down. We see we might have the class in the buttons we have. So let's go here, let's break this one, and you see that we have ID as well as class now. And we can use this class to identify this one. So what we need to do is that simply dot and followed by a class name. Okay. So this is a class. So I will copy this one and paste this one and press enter. So here dot. Now here problem is that we have space between button then space between this one, right? So how you can cater this thing over here? The point is that we need to identify this button space button dash primary. So we will remove this part because we don't need this one. And here you see that it's one of 7. The problem with the class here is that when we have more than because the class is being used across the multiple elements, the same class, right? This is always a challenge. For example, this edit button. So you will see that this edit button is using the same class. Then how you will make it unique? That's the question. So basically, you can combine both ID and class to make it unique. This means that we will be using both ID and class. Okay. So if I go here and if I scroll down to this button again, okay. So this has ID, this one, and this has this class. Okay. So what we can do is that we have identified the class. Now we have an ID here in this particular attribute, right? So we'll say hash because hash is used for the ID, right? And paste it over here. Now you see that we have uniquely identified using the CSS selector, and here we used both class and the ID. So when you are working with the CSS selector, always remember that when you have an ID, use the hash, and when you have a class, then you will be using a dot. So I will explain more about this because this space might be confusing for you. But in our upcoming tutorials, I will explain you how you can work with these kind of a classes where we have multiple classes as well, right? So we'll see how you can work with this one. But right now, for this particular tutorial, we need to understand that ID is there. Use hash with the ID, and when you have a class, dot class name. Okay, let's see one more final example for this one. For this one, let's suppose this is the progress bar, and here we have both ID and class, right? So here, copy this one. So you see that we have one of two. Still, it's not uniquely identified. What we can do is that we can use hash then ID. Then now we have make it unique. So we have used both class and we have used the ID to uniquely identify this particular element. So you can practice this around the different elements. For example, you can go with any element over here. You scroll up and if you go here, maybe you want to identify this particular checkbox, right? So this has ID, right? Now ID is JavaScript. Okay. So let's see hash JavaScript. Now we have successfully identified this one using the ID because this ID is unique in nature. In case if the ID is not unique or dynamic in nature, so we can combine it with the class so that we can have a complete CSS selector.